Hello, and welcome to the Christian Faith Publishing Author Roundtable. I'm your host, Chris Baker, and for the next half hour, we'll be speaking with several very talented authors about their newly released books, what their inspiration was for creating their unique stories, and why it would be a great book for you to read and share with your friends and family. Up next on the Christian Faith Publishing Author Roundtable, a book I'm really interested to talk about and learn more about. The book is called The Sharecropper's Son, The Prodigal Returns by author Minister Ron Richardson. Ron, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, tell everybody a little bit about your story.
Basically, it's a tribute to my parents and grandparents and how my family unit is. And then it also talks about some of the stuff I went through. My life started out in one direction where I was supposed to be this promising athlete going on to a major Division I school. And then an incident took place that changed my life for about 20 years. An incident in which during a basketball game, one of the fans jumped up and called me a name, and that don't need to be repeated. And being a hothead 18-year-old, I ran in the stands and hit him, and everything went downhill from there. But the whole book is premised on, in spite of all you do, what would it be like if God gave you a do-over? You know, being able to go back and change people's perception of you, to go back and help somebody along the way. And that's basically it.
Now, what made you decide to tell your story?
Well, actually, I wrote this book over 12 years ago, and my wife was the only one that saw it. And over time, a few people read it, and they said, "Why don't you publish it?" And I looked around, but everybody wanted these outrageous amounts of money up front, and I just happened to find your website online and checked it out, and next thing I know, I was getting a call saying that they were willing to publish it, and I was doing cartwheels at that time.
I got to imagine it had to be a pretty good sense of accomplishment to go through what you've gone through, and then to have this story you've written 12 years ago, and then to finally have the book in your hand. That had to be pretty cool.
Oh, yes. It was shocking for it to come out that beautiful. And the real test of the book was my mother. Mm-hmm. My mother is an avid reader. She goes to the library a couple of times a week, pick up like 6 books, and she reads them in about 2 or 3 weeks, take them back and do it all over again. So if the book gets past her, I know it's okay. And she loved it.
When people are looking for a book to read, who do you think is going to benefit the most from reading your book? Who's going to get the most out of it?
Anybody that's been through a struggle. And I was not ashamed about the struggles that I had, nor the falls that I had after the struggle. To let them know that you can keep getting up and that God will not be finished with you. The book will also be for those that have family members or friends who are still struggling and you don't know what to do and how to approach them. And I think this book will help them with that also. And
when they read this, what do you hope is the most important thing they get from reading your book and hearing about your story?
That's a good one. I would like for them to get is that God loves us in spite of ourselves. There was a time I was in such turmoil through addiction and pain that I would pray that God would let me die and then wake up the next morning seeing the sun hitting my face, and I would curse God and not let me die. But then I realized God is big enough to take all my pain, only if I let him. And I think other people would learn that too.
Well, it sounds like a great story and a lot of inspiration to be had in hearing this story. The book is called The Sharecropper's Son, The Prodigal Returns by author Minister Ron Richardson. You can get it today at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, a few of the online sources, as well as the brick-and-mortar stores. And Minister Ron Richardson, thanks for being on the show today.
Oh, I appreciate you for having me, and I hope the hearers had a good holiday.
And now on the Christian Faith Publishing Author Roundtable, a book I'm really interested to talk about and find out a little bit more about this. The book is called Time Out for Daddy by author Deborah Titus. Deborah, thanks for being on the show today.
Oh, you are so welcome. I am so happy to be here.
Now tell everybody a little bit about this book and this story.
Time Out for Daddy is about a little boy that's around 5 years old that's going to visit his father in prison, and he's so excited and he's so joyful about seeing his father. But the book goes deeper. It's about unconditional love. It's about hope. It's about reminding us of God's unconditional love. It's about hope in a child that no matter what, he still loves his father, and he knows that his father is going to be out of time out soon.
Now, what made you decide to write this book? What was the inspiration behind it?
Well, oftentimes I had to visit different family members in jail or different systems. And as always, as I'm sitting in the common area waiting for my loved one to come out, I sit there and I observe the children. And what I saw in them was still a joy, still a hope, unconditional love, because they were so happy to see their father. And oftentimes we as adults, after we've been through this so many times with our loved ones, we become angry, we become frustrated, we become resentful. But what I saw in the child was this unconditional love and also hope. And I just felt that God just put on my heart is that that's what he wants for all of us, to be reminded to love his children, to love unconditionally, as well as to remind us of God's unconditional love.
Unconditional love is something that we can all take something away from. Did you really kind of intend it that way, that, the kids are going to be able to get something that are going through something similar to this, and then adults can get something as well? Definitely,
because I just felt, that this was birthed inside of me by, our Father, and he wanted to remind us, especially as adults, that his love is still there, and to continue to try to see things through the eyes of a child because of their unconditional love. And I think this will be a book that will minister to children because it gives them hope and it lets them know that, hey, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is God's love through all this. And also it reminds us as adults, hey, God is saying, don't forget about me because I'm still in the process of all of this.
Now, how was it working with Christian Faith Publishing to have this idea and then to finally have it in book form?
You know what? It was awesome because this is my first book and I didn't have a clue what I was doing or where to start. And they just literally held my hand through the whole process. And I would recommend them to any author, any young author that wants to get their book out there. It was just a really great process.
Now, when people are looking for a book, whether it's online or at the bookstore on the shelf, who do you think is going to gain most from reading your book?
I think adults, really, because adults most of the time are going to be reading it through their children. So I think, because children truly understand time out. But, like I said, it goes so much deeper. And I think as an adult is reading this, it is going to make them sit back for a minute and say, okay, now I remember. Now I remember about God's love and what it's worth. So it's a book written for a child to help understand time out, and there is hope at the end of that timeout, but it's also for the adult, like I said, to just remind us God's unconditional love.
This is going to be a great book, as you said, for kids and adults as well, and we could all learn a little more and practice a little more unconditional love in our life. The book is called Time Out for Daddy by author Deborah Titus. You can pick it up today at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and Kobo, just a few of the online platforms, as well as the brick-and-mortar stores. And Deborah, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
And thank you so much, Chris.
Now on the Christian Faith Publishing Author Roundtable, a book I'm excited to talk about. The book is called Where the Timbers Cross by author David Ford. David, thanks for being on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, tell everybody a little bit about this book, because this is essentially a book of short stories. How did this come about?
Well, this is 35 Christian fiction stories, but many of them are based on true things that happened. And I've always been fascinated through the years by titles like Where the Timbers Cross, and I always thought, well, that would make a good sermon, but since I'm not a pastor, I thought it'd make a good story. So I started writing stories about things I'd heard and all kinds of events and so forth.
Now, what inspired you to finally, after you've done this writing, to finally put this book together?
It was sort of funny. I wrote 2 stories in 1997, threw them in a folder, forgot about them, and in 2014, I just happened to give them to a cousin, and I talked to him about a month later, and he had ran them off and mailed them to relatives, gave them to neighbors and pastors, and so everybody wanted to hear more stories, so I started writing a few more stories.
Now, when people pick this book up, what kind of stories are these? I mean, what kind of genres do you delve into? What kind of stories are you telling here?
All kinds of stories. I've got a lot of stories about homeless, the prisoners, and just everyday stories ranging from all kinds of things. I try to write about things that people can relate to, and I think, the saved will be blessed by the stories, and, the people that are not saved hopefully will relate to some of these characters in the story and see that they still have a chance to come to know the Lord before it's too late.
Now, is this your first publication?
It is.
How was it working with Christian Faith Publishing to take this? You start out with these ideas and to finally see this come in book form.
It's been an experience. I really can't believe how well they've, published the book worldwide and all this. And everything, I've had a problem with, they've solved. And me being a first-time writer, it really, they really helped me through the process.
Now, is this something you'd like to do again? Maybe build up another collection of stories, or maybe have you thought about maybe doing something a little longer, like a novel or anything like that?
It's funny you said that. I've already got 2 more books written, and by the end of next week, I'll have my first novel finished.
Oh, wow. Nice. Well, we look forward to hopefully talking to you about those books as well. Now, this book, Where the Timbers Cross, who do you think? I mean, it sounds like this has really got something for everyone. So it really, I got to imagine it'd be hard to pin down who's going to gain the most from reading this book. I got to imagine there's a little something for everyone, right? Oh,
there is. And again, I think people can relate to many stories, many things that's happened in their life that would be similar to that. And so I tell people, my name might be on the book, but God wrote the stories. Preparing for the publication, I had to read some of these stories 15 times, and they would still bring tears to my eyes. So I think it would benefit everybody just to read some of these stories, because some of them are just, like I said, God wrote them, I didn't.
And when people read this book, what do you hope is the most important thing they gain from reading these stories?
I think the stories hopefully will show them that no matter what situation they're in, if they trust God, He'll bring them through it. He promises to do that. And on the flip side, really, even though the stories are basically for most Christians, I really want the non-Christian to see some of the situations, and there's never a chance that they cannot change their life. And if they just decide to want to come to know the Lord, they can. And again, a lot of these characters they come to the last part of their life and they have to make the decision, and some do, some don't. So they're going to put themselves in the same situation as some of these people.
Yeah, I think this book is going to be excellent. Like you said, there's a little something for everyone. It's going to be a blessing to Christians that read it, and I think it's going to help lead a lot of non-Christians to the Lord. The book is called Where the Timbers Cross by author David Ford. You can pick it up at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and Kobo, their online platforms, as well as the brick-and-mortar stores. And David, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. Hope to talk to you in the future.
And now on the Christian Faith Publishing Author Roundtable, a book I'm really interested to talk about. The book is called For God So Loved Even Me by Fred Olivo. Fred, thanks for being on the show today.
No, thank you, Mr. Baker, for having me.
Now, tell everybody a little bit about this book and the story.
Well, the book is about my personal experiences. In the church, we refer to it as my personal testimony. It's how I became a believer of Jesus Christ, and it's just, the events that shaped and molded me early on that led me to who I am today.
Now, what made you decide to write this book and tell this story about you and really essentially your testimony?
Well, it was a long time in the makings. I mean, throughout the years, I've always given little bits and pieces of my testimony at different times in the church, in youth sessions. I am a youth minister, and people will always come up to me and say, maybe you ought to write a book. And I just didn't think that I was the kind of guy that would write a book, who would be interested in my book. And so finally, one day I gave in, and I decided to sit down, and it was fairly easy for me because all I had to do was reflect back on my life.
For those that, of course, haven't read the book yet, give everybody a little idea of what are some of the things that you've gone through, and tell everybody a little bit about your story.
Well, it's unfortunate for me at that time of my life that, I was literally born into an adverse situation. I was born and raised in East Harlem, New York. My family was poor. We were, what they refer to as today as the hood, but we called it the ghetto back then. My father went to prison, early on in my life, and I just became a victim and a product of my environment. And one day, led to another, and I became a gang member and wind up almost losing my life one night, in a rumble. I was attacked. I was stabbed in the neck. I spent 3 of my teenage years in reform school and, came back out, had an overdose, just experienced a lot of things that the streets offer. And one day I met a pastor's wife and my life was changed for the better since then. My life was heading for a lifetime prison sentence or early grave. Many of those that I came up with, that I lived side by side with, ran the streets with, died at an early age. We either murdered or died from drug overdoses, one or two even killed by police.
I got to imagine in your testimony, is that kind of the message that no matter what you go through, God still loves you?
Yes, that is one of the purposes of the title, but also that even, for many of us who come from the street life and in the inner cities, we feel like we're, forgotten. We're not even, a significant part of society in any way. And, just to know that God would even love us in spite of was very enlightening to me and really, blessed my heart.
And when people read this book, what do you hope is the most important thing they get from reading this?
Well, first of all, that they know that there is a God who is real, and he is merciful, and he is gracious, and he does save, and he does provide second, third, fourth, fifth chances, as many chances as we need. And, he truly is a merciful God. And if I can change, anyone can change. And there's hope for everyone and anyone. And God is not a respecter of persons. And that's what I would like to convey from this book and from whatever speaking engagements that I do have in the future, just to let everyone know that, life is not hopeless. As long as we have breath in our lungs and we have another day of life, we have an opportunity to get things right and reconcile ourselves with God and start all over.
This sounds like a great story of redemption and a great testimony for those who are going through similar situations as you have gone through and come through the grace of God. The book is called For God So Loved Even Me by Fred Olivo. You can pick it up at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, through the online sources as well as the brick and mortar stores. And Fred, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
And you've heard the saying, be careful what you wish for because you just might get it. Well, that's kind of the at the heart of this next book on the Christian Faith Publishing Author Roundtable. The book is called Succession, Sequel to Time Trapped in the Attic by author Linda W. Milliken. Linda, thanks for being on the show today.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Now, tell everybody a little bit about this because this is actually a sequel to your other book, Time Trapped in the Attic. Tell everybody kind of where things are left off and where we find this main character in this book.
Okay, well, Patrice Campton is the name of the main character in this book, and she's a Christian young lady who sees a house that she loves, and finally, after 4 years of praying and saving, she was able to buy the house. And then there's a secret in the attic of that house that she discovers, and she goes on adventures with her best friend trying to find out why those things were left there, because they're expensive things. And this takes her to various locations in Louisiana and Mississippi as well, trying to find out exactly where those things came from and why they were left there, because they are expensive. And this travel takes her through the first book, Time Trapped in the Attic, and it takes her all the way to the second book, which is Succession, the sequel to it. And she finally finds out exactly what's going on in this attic, and it comes through God's guidance to her. And she realizes that through God's guidance that she things that she learned, that she went about trying to find out and solve the mysteries of these particular things in the attic, she realizes that through God, she was able to get these things done. And her main problem was that even though she prayed to God to lead and guide her to ways to go, she never had the patience to wait. So she learns that she has to pray to God, but then wait for him to intervene before she acts herself. Because when we do that, we mess up the things that God has planned for us. And she realizes that. So she learns that between the first book and the second book.
Now, what inspired you to tell this story and do this sequel?
Well, that's a very good question. I retired after 39 years of teaching. I taught for 39 years in the public schools. And when I retired, I asked God to show me what he wanted me to do. And it came back to me, a ministry. So I asked him, well, what kind of ministry? Because there are a lot of different kind of ministries. And he said, writing. So these stories came about because of God's guidance. And he led and he guided me through these stories to write them and to get them done. So it was his divine inspiration that inspired me to write these two books. And now there are two. I don't know whether he's going to inspire me to do the third one or not. I'm still waiting for him. And if he does, I will. If he doesn't, I will not.
Now, how was it working with Christian Faith Publishing to get this book published? And, because, this is your second publication. And was it easier the second time around?
Well, yes, it was easier. I think because of the fact that I was able to interact with starting off with the very first person that got in contact with me. And once they accepted the book, the writing process and the editing process and all those processes were done very easily, and I was able to call and ask questions and email, and I felt good about what was going on. I felt very good about finding Christian Faith Publishing because I had prayed for a publisher. And late one night, my friend of mine was looking at television. She saw an advertisement for Christian Faith Publishing. And then she said to me, let's try this one. And that's what we did. And I do believe that God led me and directed me to Christian Faith Publishing. I was very pleased with what they did, and I'm pleased with the finished product as well.
This book, Succession, the sequel to Time Trapped in the Attic, who do you think is going to enjoy this book the most? Who's kind of like your target reader you're looking for?
Anybody that likes mysteries and plot twists and being able to try to figure out something that's going on before it actually is done will enjoy these books.
Well, I think this sounds like a fun book. And of course, I, for one, love a good mystery, so I'm excited to read this. The book is called Succession, Sequel to Time Trapped in the Attic by author Linda W. Milliken. You can pick it up today at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, just a few of the online locations as well as the brick and mortar stores. And Linda, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Chris. I really enjoyed it.
Now on the Christian Faith Publishing Author Roundtable, a book I'm really interested and excited to talk about. The book is called God Sounds the Call by author Jay Thomas. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Now, tell everybody a little bit about this book.
Well, it's about a young man that he more or less found his girlfriend in a situation with another young man, so he ran away from home, and he boarded a cruise ship, got into an accident where he was actually died and went to heaven, and God appointed him as an avenging angel and sent him back to earth to do God's work.
Now, what inspired you to write this story?
I do a lot of reading in my life, and I read a lot of things, and as I'd go along, I pick up things that I thought I would like to write about. So after I retired from the U.S. military, I didn't have all of that much to do, so I sat down and started writing my story. And as I would write along, God would give me the answers that I would need and words that I need put down.
Now, I love books like this. It's a work of fiction, and it's got a supernatural twist to it with angels and that sort of thing, but it also has a little bit of history to it because it's kind of based on Hitler's Nazi Gestapo's the cult that they had, right?
Yes, Hitler's Nazis, they were heavy into the occult, and they actually had a huge building built in Germany that was dedicated totally to the occult. They would do all kinds of things in that building, and it was something that they believed in. They would have seances and try to call up the dead to tell them what to do during the war. And I picked up on that, and I decided to kind of follow up with it.
Now, in creating this story as an author, how was it for you? I mean, it's got to be pretty interesting to be able to write something and create this world that this character's living in and all the amazing things they do. How was that for you? To be able to do that and put that down on paper?
Well, it was fairly easy when you sit down and write. You notice I started off kind of soft, and it just builds into a story. But you have to be very careful when you end one part. You've got to remember somewhere down the line there that you need to pick it up again. And I guess I've read so much in my life that it just came easy for me to do that. And an author has to be very careful about that, because if you don't pick up your story, you're just going to run out of something to say down the road.
Now, how was it working with Christian Faith Publishing to get this idea and finally have the book in front of you?
It was absolutely great. They did everything that they said they was going to do, and they did it when they said they was going to do. People there are very nice.
Now, when you're looking at the people that you think this book is going to touch the most, who's going to enjoy this book the most? Who would you say that's going to be?
I believe the younger generation, if they actually sit down and read the book and get the information that it's trying to pass on to them, I think that they will enjoy it, and the older generations also, but they've gone through a lot of this themselves, and they more or less know what's going on.
And when people do read this book, what do you hope is the most important message they get from reading it?
That evil is in this world, and that God is greater than this evil, and that He can wipe it out when He gets ready. But He is a generous God. He gave us the ability to do what we want to, and He allows us to do that. But sometimes He'll pull us up short, and you have to be very careful about that.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is a book I'm really excited to read. read myself. It seems like an interesting story, an exciting story, and a really great message along with it. The book is called God Sounds the Call by author J. Thomas. You can pick it up today at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, a few of the online outlets, as well as the brick and mortar stores. And J. Thomas, thanks for being on the show today.
You're quite welcome, and thank you for calling me.
Thank you so much for joining us for the Christian Faith Publishing Author Roundtable. We'll be back next week with another great group of talented authors to discuss their books, their process, and how they were able to get their manuscripts published and out there for the world to enjoy. If you're a writer that is looking for a book publisher, give Christian Faith Publishing a call today at 1-800-955-3794 to receive a free publishing kit, or feel free to visit them on the web at ChristianFaithPublishing.com. Have a great weekend, everyone.